Hello, my name is Daria, and as you know, I'm working at AirHelp. This presentation will be in English because we have some English guests, and I think this is going to be good for them to actually understand what this presentation is about. And the presentation is about designing user experience for mobile and web. And what does it mean? We'll see in a second. But first, let me introduce myself. I've been working in the design field for 14 years, almost right now, even though I don't look like that. I'm 28 and I started doing web design, like being a webmaster when I was 14. And during my career, I had a chance to work with some really cool companies in the Tri-City area and not only. So that's for my background. And let us start with asking this simple question like, what is user experience? Is it a buzzword? Is it like something more, something less? And I think it's going to be good if we'll start with an easy example. So let us take a restaurant for an example. When you go to a restaurant, you consider many factors which affect your overall experience with going to a restaurant. It might be its decor. It might be how far is it, if there are any free tables around. Also, if the service is good, if you have to wait long for a waiter, if he's nice to you, if he knows what to propose you, if you don't know what to order. The next thing that may affect your whole experience in a restaurant is the food. Is it something that you wanted to order, the thing that you actually get? Is it tasty? Does it look good? And finally, we have the price. You may ask yourself, like, is the price suitable for you? Was the restaurant experience worth the price? Or did you know already what the price will you pay? So to sum up, I think it's fair to say that user experience is actually overall experience of a service or a product that users actually experience within themselves. So this is a very subjective thing. But to get you some more details, we can ask, well, okay, this is cool, there's this restaurant and so on, I get it, but what really it is, especially when talking about products in IT department. So here's a little slide from uxisnotui.com, and here you can see that actually many people think that UX design is some interface design, some visual design, or like how we want to put the elements of our website or app. But actually it's much more. It's also the text that people see. It's how we communicate with people. It's also copywriting, terminology creation, prototyping, everything. So if you want to get to know more about what it really is UX, I really encourage you to go to this site because this is a very good resource for finding this. So this leads us to the question, is good UX worth it? Actually, if it's so many things, and those things to be done properly require some kind of budget to do, because it's not like you let one person to do everything, because it's not going to be manageable. And for this question, the short answer is yes. But also, the long answer is also yes, but let me tell you why is that. The first answer for that is sure, because you will create products that people will love. If you spend some time of user testing, preparing stuff in a correct way, talking to your users, you will create products that actually make them happy. You will create products that help them in their lives, that make some of the things they do every day quicker or easier. And if they do something, they will share it with their friends or peers, so you get like free advertisement for that. Another reason is that you will save time and save money. And the reason behind that is that development is a huge cost when it comes to developing new products or services. And thanks to that, you don't have to worry that the thing that you will spend months in developing it will not work on the market. Thanks to good approach to UX, you will be ready to enroll your product, and you will know that some people will actually use it because it's been tested, it's been verified, and it's been designed with users in its mind. And I guess the final reason is that you win the internet because everybody loves good products, they get good press or TechCrunch or anything. Actually, this is just a good way to do. So there you might be thinking like, is there any difference between designing UX for mobile and web? And if there's a difference, what is it? So let us compare some situations. As you can see, let's take an example for these two people. One guy is doing something at his desk at home, and the girl is taking photo of something, some graffiti somewhere. So if you consider those two images, you can, I think, easily come to conclusion that they're in totally different worlds. Actually, one person is focused, is doing things in a very relaxed and calm environment, and the other person might be in a hurry. There might be a huge traffic outside, and she doesn't have like a huge focus on what she is doing. So here's like the very basic comparison between desktop users and mobile users. So usually desktop users are more focused, more relaxed. They have much more longer attention span thanks to the situation they're in. And usually they're at home or office, so it also gives you some extra information about the environment they're working within. And with mobile users, it's much more difficult. Those users very often multitask. They're in a hurry. They do things, then forget it. They use their devices on a bus, waiting for an elevator, while talking to friends, and after that they forget what they were doing. Because of that, they have very short attention span and can be basically anywhere. So this is something worth to take account in. And let me give you an example. I will use the dating sites because I think this is a very good example for presenting both mobile and web. And let's take Okcupid as an example. It's a dating website. I don't know if it's famous in Poland, but in US it's pretty known. And as you can see, this is like the user profile. It has lots of data. It has lots of in-depth information. There is this huge amount of space that a website can take on a desktop monitor. And when you see it, when you look more closely, you can see that there are actually many actions available for the user. He can message this person, he can let him know that he visited, and he can even take some notes about it. And as a result, this kind of desktop website takes much more focus and attention to fully provide a good experience to a user. But on the other hand, we have Tinder on mobile, which is also very prominent app and loved by users. And as you can see, this is very, very different from what Okcupid was presenting. Here we have focus on just one thing, basically the photo. There are only 3 actions that user can take. Like one is to discard the person, I don't like it. The second one is I like it. And there's also some possibility to get some more info about that. What's also interesting about Tinder is that it focuses on those magic moments very quickly. Like when you get a match, it's your dopamine that's doing the work for you, so it encourages you to browse even more and more and more. Actually, it's using the same addiction system as heroin, but this is not something that we'll discuss today because it's not an ethics talk, but that's also how the mobile apps are actually prolonging their attention span. Like, it's the same with YouTube and auto-playing videos, something along these lines. So, I think it's fair to say that for desktop, the functionality and everything, the sky is the limit. Everything you want, you can have there. But for mobile, it's wiser and safer to keep things simple, to give people like one action to do, not to overwhelm them with information and stuff. So as a comparison between Okcupid and Tinder, it's fair to say that both services are well received because they offer just the right user experience for their platforms and provide users with a real value, with something the users want. So at this point it was probably like looking for a date or finding a soulmate. So this brings us to the question that this is all cool, but how do I do it? How do I create such good user experience that works well for the designated platform? And there are a few ways that can help you, probably, in this process. And I think we'll start with the most important thing that I found during my job, is to talk to people. And this is like the most important thing, because talking to people, to your users, lets you know them. How can you create something for someone without knowing this person? How would you know their tastes, their preparations, how they are using your product? Would they like it to be something mobile, something desktop? How do they even perceive the value of your product? So to talk to people, you can do like several things. You can just talk to people casually. You can organize focus groups, video interviews, or you can even run surveys to know what people like or don't like about a given product, service, or a feature. Another thing that might be really important is to make the people, like your users, the real stakeholder of your product. Let them drive it, test with them, talk with them, verify with them. Otherwise, you won't have any idea if the things you're doing are actually working for them and if they are willing to pay any money for that. After talking to people, it's worth to define key problems they have, like how your product or service can improve their lives, their work, or make something easier. And only after talking to your main audience, you will learn about their challenges and issues. Think about your product and how can it affect them, what can it give them. So in this step, while defining the problems, you can try several things. I think this is the Ishikawa chart. It's also known as cause and effect chart. And it's really easy, actually, because with those different lines, the axis, you just put the things that might affect a bigger cause. So this lets you to divide a big problem or big issue into smaller parts that are easier to fix. After that, it's also good to define the user personas that you've been talking to. Think about your key audience. Who are they? How do they perceive anything? Where do they work? What's even their salary? What do they expect? And what do they fear? And basing on that, if you define such personas, you will be able to know actually who are you designing for, who is your main market audience, and with that, you will also always remember what is your goal, how you want to make lives easier or better for this particular person, not some like general user, but this very person that you see on your persona chart. After that, it's also worth doing the customer journey. It's a tool that lets you map all the touch points that users have within your product or service. So for example, if user, let's take some, I don't know, e-commerce, for example. It all starts with defining the need of a user. How does he or she look for your product? Does he go directly to your website or comes through Google, or maybe you're a seller from Amazon and you're not really interested in having a website, and then you have to take that into account, like how does a user land on your website, if it was like a direct land or he came from Google, and how you want to like what he expects through his journey. And during mapping the user journey, you can also try to think about the issues that users have. For example, if they order something from your website and it turns out that you're out of stock or the delivery gets delayed, how do you want to approach them? Do you give them some hints that they can talk to you? Like what would they normally do? Maybe with mapping those things, like saying, hey, you can talk to us, to my shop to find a suitable solution for you. Maybe you would be able to improve the whole journey of your product and thus improve the user experience of your users. Another good advice I can give you is to follow known patterns. And this is might seem obvious, but this is quite handy because known user experience patterns for both web and mobile are something that people like because this is how our brain works. The more something you know, the more you like it, and the more it's easy for you to work or interact with something. So let's take, for example, like the landing page of Shopify. It's an e-commerce platform, and as you can see, it uses many common patterns, like the top of the page be above the fold is focused on conversion. Then you have the menu with the Shopify logo at the left, and it's probably not only natural for you that you would expect the Shopify logo to work as a link to the main website if you go somewhere. And also it's a very common pattern to use like the second CTA on the menu on the right side. So it's everything about using patterns. It's not like you have to clone everything, but with using known patterns, you can assume that users will know how to use use a product, even if it's a website, and if they will know how to interact with them. When it comes to mobile, the situation is pretty much the same. You still have some known patterns like tab groups, lists, links, bottom navigations, and so on, also for both Android and iOS. They're both different. For example, Android prefers tab navigation while iOS prefers the bottom navigation, but this has changed recently a bit because Android also, like Google in material design, also introduced the bottom navigation. But those elements are very good because they are known to the users and users know how to interact with them. Even if you don't want to have your app or website have like the same style that the iOS or material design does use, you still can have like similar patterns and use them so people will know how to look. Like I bet everyone would know that changing the tabs will present different content. This is actually very easy. So with that, I really encourage you to check out the iOS Human Interface Guidelines from Apple. This is a very thorough and very vast documentation of actually every UI element or animation or mechanism that you might like to see. And Android has the same thing. It's called Google Design, and it lets you like browse through the whole documentation of every UI element you would like to check. But there's also something more interesting with designing UX for mobile and web. So it's the way how we actually interact with our devices, whether it's a very precise mouse and cursor movement, or if it's a touch, which can happen even like when running for chasing a bus or something like that. And there are some elements, especially for the mobile web, which are very important in this, because, for example, you cannot do hover mechanism in mobile, because you cannot like put your finger above the phone and expect something to pop out. So it's good to think about those things beforehand, because it affects the ultimate experience with interacting with your app. Here's a simple example of the time zone, and how is it, and how can you optimize your interface. So it's always good to put your main buttons, CTAs, actions within the neutral or stretch time zone, but the other areas are very hard to reach with using just one hand. So this is like a tip. It's not like if you put something, for example, like the UI element known as a hamburger menu, those 3 lines, usually at the top left or top right. Corners of the app are actually on the our area in the iPhone 6 Plus, but people tend to use them anyway, so it's not like something you should totally avoid, but you should put the most important content within the natural or stretch time zone. Another nice hint is to make use of the HTML elements in your web or mobile web, because they will provide the mobile users with better UI controls. So, for example, if you use these simple things like the input types, it will make our inputs on mobile much more friendly for the mobile user than without doing that, because otherwise you would have just the normal keyboard, and this is somehow sometimes very frustrating to switch all those things or input the numbers. So this is a small thing, but it really helps. Another thing is that when you have some prototype, or at least some idea, or have this interface, it's good always to verify it with your users, because otherwise you won't know if they understand the product, the interactions, or any features with that. And the more different prototypes you test with users, the more knowledge you can get. For example, you can compare several different versions of something and try to understand which parts work best, which work maybe worse, and try to come up something with even better. That's like consisting of the best features of those several prototypes. So here are a few cool tips that I can give you for conducting user testing and testing the prototypes. So I think the very important thing is to keep an open mind and never criticize the user, because you are actually developing your product, feature, service for them, not for you. So if you say to somebody, hey, how can't you know it? Like, you should click here. This is not a good way, because it's the user that will be maybe at home, maybe in the bus, and he opens your app or product and sees your app and doesn't know what to do with it, he will just uninstall it. So this is pretty critical, I think. It's also worth not to make assumptions, just stick to the facts. Like when people say they don't know about something, or they would do this or this, always ask, why would they do it? Why do they think that why would they think that this works this way or this way? Like, don't make assumptions about their motives or actions, because you might be wrong, and most probably you will be. Another thing is that you should analyze the data that you have, for example, some tests, or maybe the A/B test or something like that, with other people. This will allow you to avoid the bias, like the personal bias, because we all have our own thinking process from different demographics and so on, and the more different views you have on some data, the more real the data will actually become, because even if you see some statistics, you can interpret them in many ways, and the more people you will have with you to analyze this data will help you avoid this bias and just stick to the most objective stuff. Also, it's worth to record the tests and make notes. It's just handy, because if you don't remember anything or just want to check some things, you can just play it on your computer and don't have any problems with going back to how the test was conducted and what the user did actually do during the test. And another thing that might be pretty handful is to ask open-ended questions. Like if you ask someone, how do you like, I don't know, Tech3camp, for example. This question already implies that you like this thing. The better question would be, what's your experience with 3camp? This way you wouldn't imply any answer, and you wouldn't avoid having a biased answer to such thing. And for prototyping and testing such things with users, you have several tools at your service. You can use the UXP, which is developed by probably some colleagues of yours from Gdynia, or now Gdańsk actually. You can also use Axure, which is a prototyping tool. There's Balsamic and there's Pencil there. Basically all the same tools that let you create different prototypes of your product and test them with as many people as you want. So they will be able to interact with this wireframe, or even like high fidelity wireframe on an actual device. Another good hint in developing, making and designing better experience for mobile and web is analyzing the real data. For such thing, you can do something called A/B testing, which actually doesn't compare two things, but can compare like as many as you want. And this can, for example, you can check how one version of your website and the second version of it, for example, with button in different color, will affect your conversion rate. So maybe if it will work better or worse. Also, a handy tool is something called the heat maps, which map your whole websites or mobile apps and show you exactly when user attention is going to, like where do they click, where do they scroll, and what are the most common areas of their interests. And for that, there are also some different tools. There's Optimizely, there's Mixpanel, and they do more or less similar stuff. Like Mixpanel lets you create some funnels that show you how many users go through each phase of your product. There's also Google Analytics, which can do actually anything if you would trust your data with Google. And there's Rodzi, which is the tool for making heat maps. So I think one of the most important stuff as well is to draw conclusions and learn from your mistakes. The more tests you make, the more things you prototype, the more you talk to people, the more you discover, the better products or services you will create by iterating. So here's some kind of summary of this presentation. Like the most important thing is more work with your users, identifying their real needs. Like what is their actual problem? What do they would like to change? How can you make their lives easier? Next, it's wise to use the common UX and UI patterns and remember about the role of touch, not only in mobile but also in web, because of the mobile web. Also, it's good to come with as many solutions as you can to test, because the more you test, the more information you get out of that. And with any solution, you should verify it with your users or with real data analytics. And just to tell it one more time, it's good to make mistakes with working towards better UX, because that's how you learn. That's how you iterate and create better products. So, thank you.